Hello F11 members, and welcome back to part 2 of the fundamentals of post-production video tutorials for issue 46, November 2015. So here we have the two images worked on in Lightroom, which were initially blended from 5 exposures to give me a DNG, exposure merged DNG. Now I've then exported those, one with adjustments made for the bottom 2/3 of the frame, the sort of darker part of the image, and one made for here, the top third of the frame, and I'm now going to put them together. What I'm hoping to achieve here is an image that looks natural and yet has all of the information in it, from the darkest tones here in the dark forests to the brightest tones in the backlit sky and the cliffs above catching the first light of the day. So I'm going to do that by using layers and layer masking, something we've done before many times in these tutorials, but every time is different, and by this repetition of achieving this sort of thing, we learn and get more practiced. So I always work by taking the darkest image here and going up here to select all of the image now, and I'm now going to just edit that by going to copy. I could go cut, doesn't matter, copy. And I'm now going to come over here to the brightest image and now just go Control V and paste the dark image on top of the light image. I'm now finished with this picture over here, the darker image. I won't use it. So to give my computer a break, because it's crunching a lot of information here, I'm going to close that down. It's going to ask me, do I want to save the changes? No. And here we have the image there, and if I bring my layers palette over so you can see what I'm doing here, what we have is the top on top of the bright. So I'm now going to make a layer mask so that I can see only this part of the darker image that I want to, and that part is the top third, the sky. Various ways I can do this. Today I'm going to use, it's debatable which way is best. Often, as you probably know from previous tutorials, I use the lasso tool. Today I'm going to use this one here. If I right click there, the quick selection tool, and I'm basically just going to move it across the image here and select all the darker bits of the image. Comme ça, and they've all gone now. So I've selected really that area of the image, the bottom 2/3 of the image, and I can choose to add to that as I see fit. And now I'm going to actually make a mask. So what I want to do is actually invert the selection. So I'm selecting not the darker bits but the brighter bits. So if I just go up here and go select, inverse, and now it's selected the top third of the image, the bit I want. I'm now going to feather that selection. So I go select, modify, feather, and I've got a feather radius of, let's go for a really soft one, of 300 pixels. Okay, click on that, and now I want to make my mask so that all I can see of this dark bit of the picture is that area that I've selected. So if I go layer and layer mask and reveal selection, okay, click on that, and now what you see, if you look over here in the layers palette, we have this mask being applied, the white area showing what we can see, the black area is where the mask is applied. So the top layer is that brighter image, sorry, darker image, but we can only see the top third of it because of the mask. Underneath we have the brighter image, and if I click on the eye on the layers palette, it makes those layers visible or not. If I click off the bottom layer, making it invisible, we can see that mask there. Okay, now what I want to do now is fine-tune that mask. This is why I do it this way, because now I've got the exposure merging. We're not far off the finished product, but I can fine-tune that mask here. What I want to do is actually just make sure that this mask here is actually affecting just a little bit more down here. So I can do that using the paint tool here. If I click on that, and now if you come down here, what I want to do is modify the edge. I want to make the mask actually affect a bit more of the top of the trees, which means I want to add to the white bit. I want to paint in white. And if I hit the X on my keyboard here, you'll see these things here indicating whether I'm painting in white or black, alternate. So I want to be painting in white, and I want to adjust. I'm just going to make the image bigger. I want to adjust my brush size now. I can use that using the square brackets key here, and up here I have opacity, and I'm going to keep that pretty low. It's at I'm going to put it to just 11%, and that means that as I paint with this, it's going to make a very subtle effect. I just want to build up that density in this part of the image. Maybe I need just a bit more opacity because I'm not seeing anything happening there. So I've gone up to 16%, and now I can see I'm adding just a touch of darkness to that. What I'm in fact doing is, if you think of it in terms of a grad filter, I'm refining, I'm modifying the area of the gradation. Come up on the opacity a bit more. Let's go up right up to 30%, and now you can see that effect coming in as I paint with it. Come out on the image size, Control and minus on the keyboard, or I can zoom using the navigator here, of course, and just take a step back and see what I want to do. There's one bit of the trees that's bothering me here, and it's this tree here, and it looks too dark compared to its neighbours, and yet it's against the bright rock beneath. So I'm going to have to be quite careful here, but I'm going to zoom right in, and now using a very small brush size, come right down in on that. Let's zoom in a bit more. What I want to do now is paint with black. I want to actually modify the mask so less is being applied just to this area of the tree here. So if I hit X, see what I was doing? I was painting with white, so that was darkening down the tops of the trees to make the gradation, the shift, less visible. And now I'm doing the same thing but in the opposite direction, so that it's going to lighten this part of the tree, but I need to be careful that I don't lighten the rock behind it and as well. If I hit X now, you'll see down here that switches to black, and now I can paint and just lighten up this bit of the tree here, being careful not to affect the rock behind. Now I use a graphics tablet here, a Wacom graphics tablet for these this sort of work, and actually it's pressure sensitive, so that means that when I'm doing a little bit of the tree here, let's move it right over here, I've gone into 200% there. Lost where I was. That's the trouble. Okay, 200% magnification. Let's come back out actually, because that's a bit too much. 100% magnification here. Now if I just flick on and off this, now if I press hard rather than I need to be painting. Activate the mask there. If I press hard, I get a big brush size, and if I press very softly, I get a tiny one. So I don't always need to be going and affecting and using the brackets key to adjust my brush size. When you're doing a lot of this kind of work, that pressure sensitive graphics tablet does really help. It's quite a neat tool. Let's just click back on that. I'm just going to do the same with some of these other tree tops here. And you can see how subtle we can be. Very minimal adjustments. If I go too far, it will look too apparent. But using that pressure sensitive graphics tablet in this particular case works well. Now the great thing about using this technique is that if for example I'm too heavy-handed, and let me show you what I mean. If I suddenly went trying to lighten this bit of tree but end up brightening the rock behind it too much, I can then just hit X and paint with black and paint that density back in, so you can correct your mistakes there and then. And we're working on a layer, so it's non-destructive editing, and it's a very controlled and subtle way of working. You have to be careful always, of course, that what you're doing looks real. And at this stage I now look at this image and think to myself, is there anything that I'm happy with, that I'm not happy with, that's worked well or hasn't worked well? Let's just go back to the background layer here, and I'm now just going to go Image, Adjustments, Curves, and bring in the curves just for that background layer. And if I clip on Show Clipping and move that arrow there, I'm just looking at if there's any margin for adjusting my white points without losing any information. And as you can see, if I go there, I do start losing some. So the answer is no, quite frankly. So let's just cancel that. But really what I want to do now is finish with this picture. It's always tempting to go too far, but I think what we've done here has resulted in a picture that first and foremost looks believable. There's no unsightly halos, and yet we've got a good tonal range in the picture. Excuse me while I sip on my coffee, but I think that's been an interesting exercise. Some pictures just take seconds to work with, and others a lot longer, and this one's been quite tricky. So what I would recommend is replaying both these videos and going through it again so that you understand exactly what we've done. But to recap today, first of all, in Lightroom I used Lightroom's merging to merge 5 exposures together. I then converted the resultant digital negative file twice. Once for the darker areas of the picture, once for the brighter areas of the picture, so I could work individually on those areas and bring them together using layer masking. And we did that by dropping the dark one over the brighter, making a layer mask, and then refining the edge of the layer mask using the brush tool. Okay, thanks for all that. I hope you followed it. We will of course be doing similar stuff again, and we'll see you next month. And please do send in your suggestions and requirements for what you would like to see covered in future issues and video tutorials of the online magazine. Thank you.